morning, and welcome to The Skinny here on WMNF Tampa. My name is Ray Rowe. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Bay Area's nearly 40-year-old alt-weekly, Creative Loafing. Joining us via Zoom this morning, once again, I believe if he's there, is the show's co-founder, Mitch Perry. Mitch, are you there?
Good morning, Ray.
Good morning, Mitch. Mitch will have you kind of move a little closer to the computer, and Mitch will get you, or Skip will get you queued up. Anybody who's new, if you don't know Mitch Perry, he's the senior reporter at the nonprofit Florida Phoenix newsroom, and he's inching ever so quickly to the end of the end of this latest legislative session in Tallahassee. Mitch, are you sleeping up there at all, or do you get hyped up at the end of this as it's coming to the finish line?
Yeah, Ray, there's so much to talk about up here, so much going on. We're at the end of the week, 6th week of the scheduled 9-week session, although talking to one of my colleagues last night, she believes this really could go beyond the May 2nd date to end the session because the Senate and House, when it comes to their budgets, which is the number one thing they're up here to do, they're really not in sync with that right now. I want to talk about that a little later in the show. We have a break segment up. Also want to talk about this Hope Florida situation here. Do we dare say it's not only just a controversy, maybe a scandal?
I mean, call it a scandal, I think.
Yeah. So we're going to get to that, Ray.
We'll also have on the second half of the show, Mitch, today, we'll be joined by representatives from the Tampa Bay Titans. That is our city's professional basketball team. They have a game tonight and a game tomorrow. But for now, we're going to stay in Tallahassee for a bit. Yeah,
and I look forward to that because I got to be honest, I didn't know we had a basketball team in Tampa, okay? I mean, we have the Orlando Magic in Orlando, of course, the other side of I-4. But yeah, Ray, let's go to the news here. I know, again, if folks, obviously listening to the Skinny, they're following the news. They may be so focused, what's going on in Washington, D.C., the latest with the Trump tariff, trade, chaotic policy that's going on there. Got everybody obsessed with that, what's going on with their 401ks, what have you. But there's a lot going on up here in the state government. And I think one of the things I want to talk about, because I'm not sure folks are listeners, and I want our listeners to participate later on in the program, call in at 813-239-9663 or send an email at dj@wmnf.org if you are following what's going on in state news. But there's a bill going on right now. There's hundreds of bills, but someone could say this is maybe the worst bill, depending on where your perspective is. And that's a bill that would make it much harder to pass citizens-led constitutional amendments, which, of course, Floridians have been doing for decades now, to do things like raise the minimum wage, restore the rights of felons to get their voting rights back, legalizing medical marijuana. So joining us in the program are a couple of people who know a lot about this issue. One of those folks is Keisha Mulford. She's the Senior Communications Strategist at the ACLU of Florida. She was previously the campaign manager and director of communications for Orange and Osceola County State Attorney Monique Worrell. And she also worked on last year's Yes on 4 campaign. That was the abortion rights amendment. Keisha, are you with us?
I am. Thank you so much for having us here.
Great to have you on, Keisha. Also joining us is Amy Keith. She's the program director for Common Cause Florida. Common Cause is a nonpartisan grassroots organization that, in its own words, is dedicated to upholding the core values of American democracy. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Mitch. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, great to have you both on. When we're talking with listeners, I think that the genesis for this legislation, other than the fact that the legislature seemingly every year wants to make it harder on voting rights overall, was this couple called by Governor DeSantis back in January to what he claimed was excessive fraud that was committed in the petition gathering process. And I want to get to that in a minute. But starting with you, Amy, let's talk about this bill, which is in the Senate. It's, I guess, Senate Bill 7016. What's your biggest problem with this bill?
So I think in brass tacks, the biggest problem with this bill is that it takes the citizen-led amendment process out of the hands of the people of Florida, and it leads our state down a path where the only things we'll get to vote on the ballot are things put there by the legislature or put there by corporate elites, right? So that's really what nuts and bolts what this bill is doing. It puts in a ton of really expensive barriers that would be almost impossible for grassroots groups. It puts in a ton of bureaucratic hurdles. to get in the way of being able to get something on the ballot. And it also puts in place some, felonies to really intimidate Floridians from collecting, ballot petitions from their friends and neighbors. So that's our real big problem with this bill, is that it fundamentally takes this process out of the hands of the people of Florida.
Yeah, Keisha, maybe you could talk about some of the provisions in here that the ACLU has a real big problem with.
Where do we start? We can start with the $1 million bond requirement just to begin collecting signatures. So as Amy said, this is a price tag that blocks grassroots efforts, period. We can talk about the criminal penalties and fines for volunteers collecting petitions, even for small mistakes. We can talk about the unrealistic deadlines, like requiring petitions to be submitted within 10 days, undermining quality control, and disqualifying legitimate ballot signatures. Or we can talk about the expanded powers, as Amy just mentioned, for politicians to just simply reject amendments that they do not like, including kicking them off of the ballot. With Amendment 4, we know that it went all the way up to the Florida Supreme Court. And this is not something that you would anticipate in a citizen-led amendment process. This bill doesn't fix a problem, it creates one by putting democracy behind a paywall, and those are the things that we all should be concerned with.
Now, we should say a couple things. There's the Senate bill and the House bill, and there's some variations with them. And I believe you mentioned, let's talk about this, Keisha, you mentioned this about the $1 million bond, because I believe in the Senate version, that has been removed. Is that correct, Amy?
Yes, it has been removed, but it's important to say that the extreme costs on petition sponsors are still ever present in that Senate bill. And I think, what Keisha mentioned, about how this creates those tight deadlines. I think it's important to set up that both bills create a real catch-22 for community groups who want to do a petition, right? Just to get on the ballot, right, you need to collect almost 1 million petitions, and you have less than 2 years to do it. That means you are collecting tens of thousands of petitions a week. And they give them 10 days to submit those petitions. And more than that, they're putting fines, right, to say that if it's late by any day, or if it's to the wrong county, $500 per form if it goes to the wrong county. And here's the crazy catch-22 here, why these rules are so unreasonable. If the voter writes a county on the form, but the voter wrote their wrong county, they still get the fine. So you have all these really important quality control processes that would be in place. You can't do that on tens of thousands of forms in 10 days. So this really, despite that, removal of the $1 million bond from the Senate version, it's still it has a version of it in the House version, but we still have incredible fines and fees, that they keep adding more to this process for petition sponsors.
Exactly. And again, listeners, we're talking about Senate Bill 7016. This bill regarding citizen-led constitutional amendments. Bill is moving through both chambers here. There are some variations. Another change that was made in the Senate bill was, you mentioned this, Amy, in terms of one of the things, or both, Keisha, you might have as well, that is reducing the number of days a sponsor has to submit signed petition forms to the appropriate supervisor elections from 30 days down to 10. Let me ask you, Keisha, why is that so significant? I mean, what we're talking about is, folks, and, as we know, a lot of folks I know were really involved with Amendment 4, in the whole process of getting them, a lot of volunteers going out and collecting signatures. So you're going to have to return them at some point to the SOE's office. Yeah. So why is that a big deal?
For us, it's a big deal because, one, the number is arbitrary. Where did this number come from? Is it 10 business days? Is it 10 days period? That's something that, well, Amy, you may know, that's something that we're still trying to figure out as an affiliate, what it is. And then also, what in a smaller number or a smaller window to turn in these petitions result in less quality control. This shouldn't be about expediency. It should be about accuracy and efficiency. And if you are pushing and as Amy mentioned, the different barriers they're putting on these petitions, you will want us to ensure that as we are sending volunteers out there, as we have folks going out there to collect these petitions, petitions, that they are accurate. Because organizations, particularly these organizations who care about democracy, who are trying to get these amendments on the ballot, they don't have $500 per petition if it's wrong. And this doesn't give any of these organizations an opportunity to even correct or rectify it. I don't know how many League of Women Voters events I go to, and they're putting petitions on the table. Someone, as I rush sometimes. So if I'm rushing and I make a mistake, or if I move, or whatever the situation is, now we're going to hold the League of Women Voters, an organization that thrives off of, donations, like community donations. We're going to hold them to a $500 fine for a mistake that I made. Give these organizations the time that's necessary to actually correct, go back to, okay, Amy, we saw this error. Would you be able to correct it or rectify it? Obviously, that petition still has to be turned in, but we're giving individuals an opportunity to do quality control checks before they actually turn it into the supervisor elections.
And there's a lot of different provisions. We could keep on going over many of them that I think you both consider egregious. But let's go to the genesis of why Governor Ron DeSantis and the bill sponsor in the House, Jenna Persons-Mullica, has been saying why we need this, and that's the concerns about fraud, right? There was the Office of Elections, Crimes and Security, which published a report in January, asserted that more than 100 representatives of the Yes on 4 group had attempted to pass that amendment last year, had committed crimes related to gathering petitions. And just last month, that same office informed Smart and Safe Florida, which is the group working to get a constitutional amendment regarding the adult use of cannabis, now on the 2026 ballot. The Division of Elections fined them over $121,000 for allegedly submitting petitions more than 30 days after voters signed them, which is a violation of existing law. Lee County Republican Jenna Persons-Mullica, who was, again, I said, sponsoring the bill, she said last week, "We have seen widespread and rampant fraud in the state and in this process. We have evidence that we cannot take a blind eye to. We must take further action to put integrity back into the initiative process." Is that fair, Amy Keith? I mean, don't we don't want fraud, obviously. So is this going too far? But is there a legitimate issue about petition fraud here?
Look, everybody agrees the bad actors should be held accountable, and we know that this is a process which is robust and that works. This is not a good faith effort to hold bad actors accountable. I mean, we know that the legislature has been trying to kill the ballot initiative process for over 20 years, ever since we passed minimum wage the first time. And they just never had a propaganda machine behind them helping them do it. You look at this, and how do I know that this isn't a good faith effort for dealing with bad actors in this process? How do I know that this is really about taking the process out of the hands of Floridians? Because, they're making it a felony to collect petitions from your book club. That's not about bad actors in the process when you're trying to make it a felony for people to collect petitions from more than 2 of their friends. It's, we know that this isn't really about bad actors when they're forcing Floridians to put their personal identity number onto the petition form and then explicitly stating that form is a public record. They are putting Floridians' information at risk. We know that this is fundamentally not a good faith effort to address anything. Everybody agrees bad actors, should be held accountable. The process works for that. This bill is not about that. This bill is about making this process impossible for Floridians. It continues a tradition of doing that, which has been around for 20 years.
Again, if you're just tuning in right now, you're listening to The Skinny here on WMNF 88.5 FM. Mitch Perry here in Tallahassee, Ray Rowe in Tampa. We're speaking to our guest, Keisha Mulford, who was a senior communication strategist at the ACLU of Florida, and also Amy Keith with Common Cause Florida. We're talking about this new proposal to make it the citizens-led constitutional amendments, the petition process much more onerous than it already is. And it's obviously, let's face it, folks, I mean, these amendments for marijuana and for abortion rights passed with strong majorities last year, but of course, 60%. Now, to be fair, that wasn't the legislature who made the 60% margin. That was the voters in Florida back 20 years or so ago. Ray, jump in here.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of openly wondering. I wonder if anyone in Tallahassee has proposed, putting this on a ballot for the voters to decide themselves. But you talked about this investigation from the elections enforcement police. or so-called. And there's a report that says that there have been 17 arrests made by FDLE over quote-unquote petition fraud. But the report also says that it's been difficult because contractors and subcontractors are based out of Florida and ignore subpoenas. I'm wondering from our guests, how much have they heard about that and how much substance there is behind that claim?
I think it's important to not give life to the propaganda election police report. I think it's extremely important to focus on how citizen-led amendments empower everyday Floridians. To your point, one is important to note that when the citizen-led amendment initiative even entered the ballot, it did not get 60% of the vote. So we can start there. It didn't get 60% of the vote, but it passed. It passed. So do with that what you will. I think the truth is this has nothing to do with 17 arrests or whatever the number is. It has nothing to do with that. As Amy mentioned, we know that the folks in Tallahassee have been trying to kill citizen-led amendments for years. You just didn't have a propaganda machine behind it like we see now. You didn't have election police showing up to folks' houses asking if they signed a petition. We didn't have what we see now. So I think that's part of the difference. And it is also just important to note and focus on the fact that Tallahassee is making it harder for their constituents to amend their own constitution. You can cut petition timeframes, you can add more fines and fees, you can threaten people with crimes, but you're doing this all because you don't like that the people of Florida want to make rules for their own communities. So that's what we should be talking about here. I think that if we give life and give credence to 17 people out of this massive campaign, we're undermining the work that Floridians have done and the voices of the 57.2% of Floridians who voted yes on Amendment 4. We're undermining the voices of those who voted in favor overwhelmingly for Amendment 3. I think we have to be careful not to allow this propaganda machine to outshine and outweigh what Floridians have voted for.
I want to ask you, Keisha, staying with you, having worked on the campaign for abortion rights last year, how significant is, again, one of these provisions requires that petition circulators must be U.S. citizens and Florida residents who've not been convicted of a felony. What I know, and I'm been reporting on petition drives and amendment drives for years and decades, and I know that there's some of these workers who come from out of Florida. I mean, I know some of them are out of Southern California. These are people who, because it's hard work, it's sweaty work, obviously in Florida, not getting these petitions. And so people do it. And I know it's become harder to pay these people because they changed it like 5 years ago where you couldn't pay them per signature anymore. But now I know you'll find people, who are going to do these campaigns are going to find people in Florida. But that's kind of significant, is it not, that you have to limit it to only people in Florida?
So, and that's just what we're talking about. We're talking about limiting the rights of volunteers to volunteer. we're telling folks you can't assist in matters that that folks care about because you don't live here, because you're not a citizen. But what does that do in the long run? Like what actually are we protecting when we're giving something as small as a volunteer, or we're forbidding something as small as a volunteer from literally doing something for free? I don't think that it serves a purpose. I don't think that it changes anything to stop this outside influence that they're claiming is a part of it. Yes, Floridians should lead the process, but again, this bill does not stop outside influence. It just punishes everyday people who care about their communities. It punishes folks who, may not live here all year, who may not vote here year round, but they do. I know a lot of snowbirds. There are a lot in my community who come here when it's cold up north, right? So they're invested. They come to our meetings. They come to our HOA meetings. They own, they may own property here. They just don't live here permanently. If they want to get involved in a citizen-led amendment process, why are we prohibiting that? I think it's important to identify that if lawmakers were serious about protecting our process, they wouldn't be criminalizing volunteers or adding these ridiculous requirements to make it more difficult for folks to literally just get involved in the process. And it's also important to note that we're talking about First Amendment rights here as well, right? So we're crossing over the line, and we're basically prohibiting people from expressing their First Amendment right to participate in matters that are important to them and their community.
I also bring Amy Keith back into this. Amy, we saw in Amendment 3 and 4 last year, I think they were both, the campaigns spent over $100 million. They were incredibly expensive campaigns. It seems like you need like $100 million now. Forget about this new law kicking in July 1st, if that's in fact when it does. It's already become so expensive because the rules have been changed so significantly over the decades, actually, making it much harder and much more expensive. And yet that's kind of the arguments by the supporters of this, as they say, it's out-of-state millionaires who are bankrolling these efforts, and we want to make this a citizen-led thing back with the people of Florida. It just seems like, you'll still, I would not believe, because there's people, including Smart and Safe Florida, who've got money to do this, but there's only so many of those organizations. Obviously, the folks, folks from Yes on 4 who put so much money and effort into it last year, they're not ready to come back right now for 2026. There's no effort to do that. So can you talk about that? Because it seems like they're just turning that argument upside down. They've created that situation. Now they're saying that's the problem.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Like, we know what they're saying, right? But then look at what they're doing. They're making this process so much more expensive. This started way back when. It used to be that, Floridians could collect signatures about a petition, and those signatures didn't expire. Now they expire, like, I think in under 2 years, right? So they have crunched the time frames for Floridians to organize. If you want if you want to make this process more citizen-led, you would support more volunteer action. You would support more Floridians getting involved. You would support longer, signature collection timeframes. You would support more quality control. You would support lower costs. That is none of what we are seeing with this. When you look at what they're doing, and I'm going to go back because I think there's a couple really, I look at 7016 in particular, and truly, if you were to, this isn't hyperbole, if you were to collect petitions from folks in your book club or your running club or your kayaking group that wants to protect the water, that would be a felony to collect more than 2 petitions. So how is that about outside influence? And what you're shutting down is fundamentally what should be the core of this process, which is Floridians talking to and working with their neighbors to pass policies that we know we need when our legislators are ignoring us. Because ultimately they know this is about policies that we pass when they're ignoring us, like minimum wage. They don't want us to pass those policies. That's why they're making it harder for us.
Again, if you're tuning in, you're listening to Skinny here on WMNF 88.5 FM. It's almost 11:30 here. We're on Mitch Perry in Tallahassee, Ray Roa back in Tampa. We're speaking with Keisha Mulfort from the ACLU and Amy Keith from Common Cause Florida about this bill that would change the citizen-led amendment process. Amy, I want to stick with you and go. There's actually another election bill, right, that's going on right now that is also sponsored by Jenna Mullica. That's got to do, I believe, with it's citizens. It's more about who is a citizen, kind of one of these things where you're making sure who's allowed to vote or not. Kind of a different angle here, but staying with the idea, I guess, what we've seen in these major election reform bills since the 2020 election, where you're kind of making it still kind of harder for people to vote. Can you tell us a little bit about that bill?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for bringing that bill up, Mitch. This is HB 1381, which we expect we'll hear this week. And Floridians should be extremely concerned about this bill. This is a bill that will say that you have to submit documentary proof that you are a U.S. citizen in order not just to get on the voter rolls, but to stay on the voter rolls, right? So this includes people who've been voting for years if they change their address. And this bill would affect, tens of thousands of Floridians. Just think about how many of us don't have a valid passport. How many of us don't have a copy of our birth certificate, or our birth certificate doesn't have our current legal name? For example, for women who have been married and changed their name. This really heightens the documentation requirements just to get on the voter rolls, or again, to stay on the voter rolls. It's really important that people know that this is, again, about limiting the voice of Floridians. Just like the citizen-led amendment bill, we see shutting down the ability to make our voices heard through our vote. That is exactly what this elections bill would do. It would seriously limit which Floridians can cast their ballot in our state. Even so, eligible Floridians literally not able to register or kicked off the rolls. So it is egregious. We are very opposed to that bill. It would have a really negative impact on the ability of the people of Florida, to have this be a government of and for the people.
Okay, we're going to close out this segment. Going to you, Keisha. What our last words to our listeners here out there? What can you say to them? Because what can people do, really? I mean, quite frankly, this is going to pass. Okay, this is a Republican legislature. They may be the Republicans may be fighting each other on issues, but on this, they're pretty much in sync. So, what can you tell the listeners out there?
At the end of the day, this is about who holds the power: politicians and their donors, or the people of Florida. For decades, we've used citizen-led amendments to raise wages, protect our water, and expand voting rights. We've done it despite the high hurdles, and now they're seeking to build their wall even higher. It is imperative that every last one of us have a say in what's happening. So call your state senator. Tell them to vote no on SB 706. We need to continue to advocate for ourselves, for our children, for our community, and let them know that this is our Constitution and not theirs.
Amy, last words?
Yeah, again, it's important for the people of Florida to stand up right now and say that we want power in our own hands, not in the hands, of just the legislature or corporate elites and corporate donors. Again, as Keisha said, call your Florida senator, tell them to vote no on SB 7016 or any other effort to limit the citizen-led amendment process from being in our hands of we the people. And this bill just takes it out of our hands.
All right, we'll leave it there. Amy Keith is the Program Director for Common Cause Florida. Keisha Mulford is the Senior Communications Strategist at the ACLU of Florida. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us here on WMNF.
Thank you for having us, Mitch.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks very much. So, Ray, what do you think?
I mean, I think it's scary for people who vote, just because it shows that everybody in Tallahassee is afraid of what happens when people show out and forced to vote. And it's hard to take a long view on it, because you just wonder what this is going to look like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years down the road. People are so used to, at least politically active people are used to participating in signature drives and working on amendments and things like that, and feeling like they have some say in their government. So I guess, this is editorial, but, it's a little disheartening to hear that, and a little bit disappointing to see that coming out of Tallahassee, considering everything that we have going on in the state. I know it's a short session, and I know that a lot of people wish we were working on some other stuff, but it goes to show how much power people actually still have right now, and we'll see what happens after this bill passes, as it presumably will. Yeah,
Ray, and before we move on to our next segment, I do want to spend a couple of minutes to talk about some other things that happened this week. Actually, this has been a really explosive week here in Tallahassee. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, this growing issue with Hope Florida. That's the state charity overseen by First Lady Casey DeSantis, that pays churches and nonprofits to get people off of government services and get them on their own. Started, I think, 2021. A lot of concerns, because there's actually a bill that's moving through the legislature that would put this very modest bill, right? But it's really put more attention on Hope Florida. It was going to put the Hope Florida office in the office of the executive office of the governor. But there was a bill analysis that came out. They have these analysis of all these bills they're going through, and it said that let me read to you what the House bill analysis said, that under Florida law, a direct support organization, or what they call a DSO, must submit to the agency it supports a number of items, including a copy of the organization's code of ethics and its most recent tax returns. Existing law also requires each DSO create or authorize with an annual expenditures in excess of $100,000 to provide an annual financial audit. Well, Hope Florida has done none of that. Okay, it's like, whoa, what's going on with that? So that's when questions began being circulated the last couple of weeks. And then we have this story coming out that $10 million of a $67 million settlement with a healthcare company the state works with went directly as part of a negotiated settlement to Hope Florida, but it was never reported. And Ray, this is taxpayer money, right? So this has become a big deal here in Tallahassee. And yes, Ron DeSantis says it's all political. By that, it's because Casey DeSantis, his wife, is still, considered to possibly be a potential candidate for governor in 2026. And so, what does she have to really stand by her, in terms of a public record? Well, this Hope Florida thing. And so now that Hope Florida is being really scrutinized, he's saying it's a media conceived event and that he's blaming the House Republicans, who, by the way, the Speaker of the House, who's very much a Republican, Daniel Perez, said the other day, it looks like this could be illegal. So this is a big deal. And, we'll wait and see how it goes. But this is the last thing. Casey DeSantis is obviously a big underdog, I think, if she were to get in this race.
Against Byron Donalds, for sure.
But now that this little controversy is dogging her and dogging Ron DeSantis, man, but it's also, again, every Florida taxpayer should care about this because it's your money that is moving around this organization that we don't really have much accountability about.
Yeah, it's interesting. And, it's kind of comes about a year after the Florida Disaster Fund came under scrutiny, too. The Florida Trident was, reporting that it was kind of hard to track where a lot of the money going into this Florida Disaster Fund. And the person who was the face of that organization was also Casey DeSantis. But I think, I'll say this, the governor has a little bit of a point. It's interesting that it is the leading House Republicans who've suggested that the payment to this foundation could be legal. Because I wonder, everybody knows, if you're paying attention to politics, that there's a little bit of a rift between Republican leadership and the governor. And I wonder if it wasn't that way and it was more sunny, we would even be hearing those kinds of comments.
Well, that's a great point. And I would say this, I'm really, this House Speaker Daniel Perez, I think is a very interesting guy because he's dead set, they have 2 years in power, right? And they really want to accomplish something. And he has been very cool under the stress of DeSantis blasting House Republicans as being, quote unquote, liberals, right? That's the worst thing. In Ron DeSantis' world, you can call anybody a liberal, right? Or working with the media, the liberal media. Life. And he is like really calling out the House Republicans and saying they're really trying to foul everything up. This goes back, remember, for the immigration thing back in January, where the Speaker of the House and the Senate President said, no, we don't want to have an early session on immigration. We can do it during the regular session. They ultimately, acquiesced and they came up with a bill, but they were at odds back then. And that's where the battles are going to be, Ray, in Florida, up here in Tallahassee, Republican versus Republican violence, right? Because the Democrats are an afterthought here.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
It is kind of, fascinating to see this happen, and it's absolutely, but this is legitimate because, with Doge and with Elon Musk, Republicans, this is the cool thing now to like go after government waste, which I think everybody should be for. So let's do it in your own backyard. That's what they're looking at. It's not just Hope Florida. There's all these issues with company vehicles, agency heads who don't live in Tallahassee who are flying all around the place. So they're costing this taxpayers millions of dollars. And that's what the House is looking at this session. And DeSantis doesn't like it. And by the way, he still has leverage, okay, because he can veto their appropriation projects. He can veto their bills. So he is by no means irrelevant. And I don't want to leave that, make that thought here. And then one other thing I want to say before we go to our next segment, and that is regarding taxes. Okay, this is a big deal. So DeSantis wants a property tax. Ain't going to happen this year. We may vote on it next year. But the House came out with a big dramatic reduction in sales tax, right? We pay 6% sales tax. I think it's more in Hillsborough and Pinellas counties. Hillsborough, I know for sure is. But anyway, to 5.25%. The Senate came out this week with a proposal to anything under $75 you buy clothes or shoes, you could get a tax break on that. So I don't know how they match those up. And again, we only have 3 weeks from today when they're supposed to be finished. That's a big discrepancy in terms of a tax cut. So I think this matters to everybody, right? Because we're all going to pay it, and we could all get a break one way or the other here. They're dedicated to doing this. We don't have a state income tax, obviously. So sales taxes, property taxes, they are important to fund the state. So I hope people watch that. By the way, I will be back in studio next week. We're really focused a lot more on this stuff when I'm back there. So Ray, let's go.
Yeah,
on next
perfect. I wish we had this sound effect of like sneakers on a basketball gym court, because that's like where my head's been for the last few days as we kind of like have gotten ready to welcome our next guest. Last year was a leap year. Creative Loafing Tampa Bay asked our readers, what does this community need to have in place in 4 years to be a better place? And one reader said an NBA team. So they were talking about the Toronto Raptors. We had hosted them during COVID. The Orlando Magic obviously plays 2 hours away. We've got the USF Bulls, a great team to support, but people obviously want more. And I couldn't find an instance of a pro basketball team in Tampa Bay besides the Tampa Bay Titans. Players are paid. They're working hard for exposure that hopefully will send them to the G League and overseas leagues. Some of these players have played overseas. The team was technically established in 2018, and this weekend starts a new chapter in its history when it begins to play at Tampa Prep in downtown Tampa. We don't talk about ticket prices on this nonprofit radio station, but that game at Tampa Prep is Saturday, April 12th. And the last game before the All-Star that's the last game before the All-Star break. But tonight they have a game, their last one at Leto High School, which is actually the alma mater of the team's GM, Daryl Hepburn, and that's tonight. So joining us in the studio right now, Lauren Barth, Director of Business Development and Operations for the Titans, Michael Sumby, did I say that correct?
You did.
Assistant Director of Admissions at the University of Tampa? Or no, I'm sorry, Tampa Prep. And Francis Seo. Francis, am I saying that right?
Yes, sir.
He plays guard for the team, and some locals might know him from St. Leo, where he averaged 14 points a game over there. Welcome to the Skinny, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's just start with this. The team is 7-1.
Yeah.
Am I correct here? Any other pro team with that kind of start? I mean, you could imagine the headlines. That's pretty serious. Maybe I'll just go to Francis on this. I think the guys on the team always kind of know who they are. Yeah. But what do you say to people like, here's a 7-1 team? Why are you 7-1, man?
Man, honestly, we're a talented bunch, man. We got a bunch of great players, like you kind of touched on. A lot of guys that, like myself, played overseas, are back in the area looking for opportunities to grow, and we're really just putting our best foot forward. People like Lauren, our owner, Byron, they've put us in position to, have a great environment, high-level facilities. Thank you to Tampa Prep. And just who you can't beat Tampa. So
Tampa is a great place to live. I was talking to somebody the other day. It really does feel like a different city than it was even 5 years ago. So it makes sense that a team like the Titans would be here. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think you guys play in the Basketball League now is what it's called. It was formerly the North America Premier Basketball. Correct. Is what it was called. And there are 3 conferences currently in TBL. Correct? West, Midwest, and the East?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you guys play, there's 16 teams in that conference alone. As the team was coming out of the pandemic, WTVT reported that Titans players make anywhere between $1,500 and $4,000 a month. Is that still the case? And I guess what I'm getting at is, like, you guys are playing basketball at a really high level and very committed to who you are as athletes and the work you have to do. But then you have to have another life on top of that. Yeah. And you have to make really hard decisions. I mean, I can't imagine if you have a family. What's that like? Talk about who your teammates are, who your coaching staff is, and who these guys are that just care about a game so much. And obviously, if you're a sports fan, you know it's more than a game. You know what it means for people coming together and things like that. And we know what sport feels like to watch and participate in. But talk about who these guys are, because these guys are special in that way, and their commitment is really deep.
Like you said, a lot of us are committed to basketball, it being more than just a game, but it's more to us than that. A lot of these guys are, mentors, coaches. We got guys driving from Miami to get to Tampa.
Coaches driving from Ruskin.
It's a commitment, but I think the main thing, we look at it as we do it out of love. Obviously we're compensated, but we know that it's a dream that can lead to something bigger. So we're willing to put our best foot forward to see it come to reality.
And this is the team's first year under the ownership of Byron Johnson, who is a lifelong Tampano. Maybe for Lauren, can you talk about the team's transition and what new ownership's approach to this team is?
Sure. I was not part of the organization before Byron, so I came on with Byron and with the general manager, Daryl Hepburn. So I don't know personally what it was like, except for hearsay, and the improvements that Byron Johnson has made for this team, the organization, our involvement in the community, allowing me to kind of take the lead on developing different relationships within the community, exposing the guys to international contacts that I have, to try to get to the next level in this. The sacrifice that the guys make, the players, even our coaches, and the time that they spend in what we're doing, it's unbelievable how much sacrifice they make for this team and what they put into it. And I think the goal of everything is the reward at the end. You know, there is a bigger reward of the end of this, whether it's community engagement, being on shows like yours, the network that we're meeting people through. You know, there's always someone that knows someone that knows someone that could have a benefit to bettering, one of our lives. So not sure if that answered your question, but, Byron Johnson has done a tremendous job with just improving the organization and taking it to the next level.
Yeah, I definitely want to ask about that community engagement a little bit later. But since we're talking about you coming to the team, you come to us from the New Jersey Devils. You spent time working with the Atlanta Hawks and even smaller teams. South Carolina's Lexington County Blowfish. Oh, is it? No, it's a totally different person.
Completely. That's not me.
Well, great.
So I have an equestrian background, actually.
I'm sorry.
Wrong Lauren Barth, but that sounds fantastic. She must be doing really well. No, I don't have any hockey experience. I do have, I played basketball as, in high school, so I do understand the game of basketball, but I got brought on more as a business.
Okay.
From the business side, I am kind of a serial entrepreneur.
Okay.
I have been self-employed since 19 out of high school, but in the equestrian world. So I am in the competitive, industry, athletic industry, professional athletes. But I'm very business-minded and, do the development and the operation side of this organization. So the Titans is my first hands-on on an organization at this level.
Okay.
In that sense, so.
Well, that's quite different than what I had set up there so confidently, too.
Sorry to interrupt, but if you're heading from St. Pete to Tampa, be aware that there's a long delay on the Howard Franklin Bridge going northbound. So just watch out.
Stay home. Just go to the game tonight.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, just come out to the game tonight, Leto.
Let me ask you something. I saw Terrence Kinsey is involved, and as assistant GM, he's a familiar name for anyone who followed Jefferson High School. He played for the Grizzlies and the Cavs.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. See, I'm right about that.
Yep, you got it. You got TK good.
What is in it for owners and leadership here? You kind of touched on that. There's a lot of community connection. TK is obviously really happy to come back and support the community. It's really fun to listen to him and Daryl talk about kids in schools.
Yes.
And I think, not take away from the varsity squad per se, but they talk a lot about the junior Titans.
Correct.
And engaging with middle school students a lot. And they're really involved, and a switch really turns on when they start to talk about kids. Can you talk about the role that this team intends to fill and play in the lives of young kids here in the Tampa Bay area?
Absolutely. So we have done quite a few engagements at local high schools and middle schools. We've been to Pierce, Greco, Lato, Jefferson, to name a few. We have probably 3 or 4 more on the docket in the queue coming up soon. Their involvement is to, especially with, more inner city kids, is to give them the opportunity to realize and to see that there is more opportunity out there. They can make it. Some of these guys are local Tampa guys. They have a following in Tampa, but there's something bigger than this. We have a gentleman on the team, Nazir Kaur. He plays in the Big Three. We have a Bryce Beamer. He's played overseas, I believe, in Finland. Francis is working on getting an international contract as we speak. And So I think just giving those kids some people to look up to. There's so much in basketball and the community, and just giving them that, that encouragement. And, there's more to this. Okay, maybe your parents or your family may not be able to provide you with this opportunity, but look what you could do if you get involved in a team or in a sport, or have a mentor like Terrence. He's a great role model. He's fantastic with the kids. And it definitely, and I think, for them being involved in something with the TBL, I think that there's opportunities for them going forward. Maybe they'll get an opportunity with a NBA team in the, a GM or assistant GM. Don't quote me on that. I have, that's not my department, but, so there's different opportunities and circumstances that mean different things to all of us. So.
If you're just joining us right now, that voice belongs to Lauren Barth. She's a director of business development and operations for the Tampa Bay Titans. That is our city's pro basketball team. Francis Sio is also here. He plays guard for the team tonight. They have a game tonight at Leto High School. It's their last one at Leto High School because they'll be moving over to Tampa Prep starting tomorrow. And tomorrow would be the last game before the All-Star break for TBL. Also in the studio with us is Michael Sumby, Assistant Director of Admissions at Tampa Prep. Welcome.
Hello.
Talk to me a little bit about bringing this team a little bit downtown. I know that the Leto community probably, it's farther away, and there's probably a lot of people from the neighborhood that go there. It'll be a little bit of a haul. But, I remember the moment I went to that first Tampa Bay Suns game, and I was like, look at this. Huge sports thing happening right here in downtown, right on the river. Your complex is maybe 3-4 blocks south on North Boulevard. Talk about how that relationship opened up and why you guys are opening your gym there. Your facility is busy. I'm there every Sunday for my kids' soccer, and there's always stuff going on. So talk about making the space for the team to come here and what that means to you and why you're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, we are located right in the heart of downtown Tampa, so we're really in it for the success of Tampa. Community partnerships are just a natural part of that, and so we really wanted to support the Titans and be a part of their story, be a part of their success. You did mention Tampa Prep and our facilities, and so that's just one of the reasons as well. We have some of the finest academic and athletic facilities in the region, so we wanted to continue to develop that opportunity, and we're in it for the commitment to the current and future success of Tampa, and so we see an opportunity, and we can't wait to continue this partnership.
Francis, talk to me a little about practice. Coach is pretty cool. I got to watch a couple podcasts on him. He's also a guy who's made a deep commitment to Tampa, right? Yep. The community has embraced him. Yep. He came over here from another country, more or less, to be a basketball guy, and now he gets to be a basketball guy here. How were tryouts with him? Did you go through the tryout process? And what's it been like here as, through the first 8 games, kind of galvanizing and becoming a team here?
So just to touch on a little bit, Rob, he's a great coach. Obviously, he came all the way from Germany to coach us. He I actually worked with him while I was in college. He was my trainer, so got a good relationship with him. He told me about Tampa Bay Titans, and I jumped on the opportunity. Practices and the entire tryout period was very high level. A lot of high level guys came through. We were fighting tooth and nail, everyone to get a spot, and thank God I got to the other side. But I'll say practices are very detail oriented. We focus in on what the other team is doing, what we are supposed to do, our concepts, and he always likes to say you got to bring your brain to practice. So it's really good for guys in my position trying to get to these higher levels, forcing us to think the game and implement all these things. So, I say practices have been a big part of why we are 7-1.
And practices are a big deal for you guys too, because you can only dress so many guys for the games. And I know that I think a player has to play maybe 2 times at least to be eligible for the playoffs. 4 times. Okay.
Right.
So, so he's getting rotating people out naturally already. On top of that, he's having to make decisions about who's available to travel and who's playing well that week. Oftentimes he has to make those decisions well before the game. So, if somebody has a dip in performance, Coach Rob is having to do that. I know you're not the coach, but talk to basketball people a little bit. I know Mitch is a huge basketball guy coming from the San Francisco Bay Area, but what style of basketball do the Tampa Bay Titans play?
We're definitely very much up and down, exciting team to watch. We got high flyers, guys that can score, a little bit of everything. I mean, it's nothing that we lack on the offensive end. But I think where we really hang our hat is being able to guard and pressure teams, create turnovers, and be able to create those, fast break opportunities. And that's like I said, that's really where we hang our hat. I think that is a big factor in who ends up playing at the end of the week as well, who's bringing their best foot forward in those practices.
I think you're one of the younger guys on the team at 25. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's actually kind of crazy, right? But,
yeah. What is the range of what is the age range here of guys on the team?
There's Chase and.
Oh, Chase.
Yeah, you're probably mid range.
Well, I guess I'm mid.
This guy is just is 32.
Yeah.
Rodney Simeon just turned 30 yesterday. I think Chase.
Well, 24.
24,
23, 24 is the youngest. Yeah.
So
but yeah, like from 23 to 32, 33, yeah.
Some of these guys have families, right? And you've seen married, full thing.
Trey Dooms has a baby on the way. Trey Dooms has a baby on the way. He's a fantastic player and a great asset to our team. Justin Blanks, him and his wife have a child on the way. Ken has a whole baby factory going on with his wife. And his wife, she actually directs our dance group.
Okay.
So them and just to shoot. Francis set us up with a practice facility also, Pickup USA.
Yeah, I was going to say, where are you guys playing?
Yeah, so we've been practicing at Pickup USA.
Okay.
We just started that this past week, and that has been a phenomenal upgrade to their training.
Okay.
I go to the practices in the morning. We have 6 a.m. practices. We since moved that to 5:30 a.m. The guys, the first day that they walked in, it was like, wow, we are finally, like, this is it. Like, we are an actual, real professional team. So taking that and elevating the game up to there was a tremendous move. So we definitely thank Francis and Daniel Hill, our trainer, for getting us into there. And that was a great move for us.
Besides going to the gym this weekend and watching it, I know there's some live streams, I think, online.
Yes.
How else can people watch these games?
They can come to the games,
Right.
Lato High School tonight and Tampa Prep tomorrow night. But there is a live stream on our website, www.tampabaytitans.com. And I will say our live stream that Byron sets up is the best in the league. It's clear. They have 5 or 6 different camera angles set up. It is phenomenal. So,
yeah, in an age of the internet where content is so important, but sometimes content can look so good, but the content itself is so lousy. It's a lot of fun to watch Tampa Bay Titans content. I mean, it's very cleanly produced. The podcast is the same way. The social media is the same way. And then the quality of the play is really great. Like, it's awesome. I feel ashamed that I didn't know about this team until actually I saw it on social media. So big kudos to you guys. With the 10 seconds we have left, that's a big team for you guys to do on social.
That's
right?
what we're here for. You have to come out and see the Tampa Bay Titans.
Well, thank you so much, Lauren Barth, Michael Schumi. Sumby, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
And Francis Sio here from the Tampa Bay Titans. Thank you for coming in on a game day. They're at Lato High School tonight, back at Tampa Prep tomorrow. Tampa Bay Titans on Instagram?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And the website is tampabaytitans.com.
Yes.
Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you
here.
for having
Best
us.
of luck to
Thank
you.
you.
I can't
Appreciate
wait
the
to see
time.
you guys in the championship.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Go
And
Titans.
thank you to our listeners so much for listening to WMNF Tampa. Mitch, thank you once again for zooming in from Tallahassee. Excited to see you in the studio next week. Hoping to talk a lot about a new Creek Shed project coming out of the University of South Florida St. Petersburg campus. That's where Joellen drove over from, Pinellas. She's in Studio One now with Art and Ear. Thank you so much for supporting WMNF Tampa, and please have the best weekend ever. I went out a minute early, huh?
WMNF Tampa.